Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome back to my Sims 4 speedrunning video, or welcome to the channel if you're new here. So in today's video, I'm going to be building in the world of Oasis Springs, which is one of the base game worlds, and I'm going to be building a fairly big Mediterranean family home. So this house ends up having 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, and it's built on a 30 by 20 lot. Now I'm saying fairly big because, I mean, don't get me wrong, it doesn't end up being an absolute massive mansion. You could probably already tell that by the main structure that I've pretty much already built. But in terms of the size of the house and the amount of rooms that it's got, I think it's quite a fairly good size in terms of family gameplay kind of house. But this week I just really fancy building something a bit Mediterranean-y, and I was debating between building in the world of Tartosa, which is the world that we got from the Wedding Stories game pack, or building something in the world of Oasis Springs. And I really couldn't decide which one I wanted to build in, because I wanted to build something in like a Mediterranean kind of style, but I just didn't know which one to build. And then earlier in the week I actually was on Pinterest, which, I mean, if you've been here for a while, you probably know that I am a big fan of Pinterest. I'm quite literally always on the app. But I was on Pinterest and I stumbled across this picture and I instantly fell in love with it, and I wanted to try and rebuild it in the game. And it looks like it would fit in more so Oasis Springs more than what it would in Tartosa. And so I pretty much just got the picture and didn't want to exactly recreate it, but I wanted to take elements from the picture and implement it into the build somewhere. I feel like if you do a comparison between the picture and the build that's on the screen now, I mean, I know I'm actually currently doing the floor plan, but I'll keep it up long enough so you can kind of see the comparison from the outside. But you can definitely see similarities, but then there was a little parts that I decided to just go off on a bit of my own whim, what I felt looked better for the game. Because sometimes trying to recreate pictures or drawings or something, trying to recreate stuff in The Sims 4 can be quite tricky because of the grid system. And so I basically just took parts of the picture and then popped them into the build and tried to make it work, and I'm really happy and also a little bit proud of the way this house turned out. So I hope you guys like it. But anyway, getting on and actually talking a little bit more about the build. So you can see that I've already gone around and done all the different wallpapering, the roof tiles, and I've also already placed down some of the windows. Now the windows that I've used in this build are from the My Wedding Stories game pack. I don't often use these windows because they're quite hard to use, I find, because we've only got them in 2 different sizes. We've got the quite long one and then we've got this little short one, and I find myself almost wishing sometimes that we had like a 2 tile or a 3 tile version of mainly just the shorter one, because the long one is great. I mean, to be honest, I feel like if we got a bigger version of the longer window, it might look a bit strange in game. But you know, the little tiny square one, I would love that in like a 2 tile version, just so it's a little bit bigger, because I find it quite hard sometimes whenever I'm trying to use these in a build. But I think I managed to make them work in this build. I did actually mismatch with some other windows that we got from the Sims 4 base game, so it worked out quite nicely. But another thing that I did in this build is I tried to make it look like there was quite a big archway going into kind of like the little porch entrance area. Now the way that I did this is I actually got this archway which is from, I think, Jungle Adventure, and I basically sized it up using the tool mod. I think I sized it up by 1.5 times, and then using the same mod I then elevated it into the floor, because if you're not aware, whenever you size up archways or doors in the game, if you say for instance size up a door that's meant to be on the shortest wall frame, if you then size it up like 2 times, it's then going to clip into the wall frame above it, or like the area above it. So then if you elevate it into the floor, you can just kind of like work around that. But then another thing that I did with the archway, where I sized it up, the thing is, the way the objects work in the game, you can't size something up and then the whole thing be sized up. So you know, for instance, when you have a window or if you have a door, you size it up or you size it down, you've still got that like empty gap where the original size of that window or door would be. Like the space for the archway itself won't size up. The original space for how big and how wide that archway area should be doesn't size up when you size up the actual initial object. And so pretty much whenever you have to size up something, you then have to find something to kind of like mask over the kind of like empty area in the wall, if that makes any sense. I really hope I'm explaining this well enough, but if I'm being a bit confusing, I think if you go back, you'll be able to see me do it because I do it on screen, but you'll probably be able to go back frame by frame and see what I mean when you do size something up. It's kind of like an empty gap around it. I basically just found this archway which is from the Cats and Dogs expansion pack. It was pretty much the exact size and shape that I needed to kind of like cover up to make it look like this big Jungle Adventure archway was just one archway, but in actual fact it's just 2 archways mixed in together. But yeah, hopefully that was easy enough to follow along with. If you've got any questions, just pop them down into the comments and I'll reply to you. Hopefully I explained it well enough so you're not going to have any questions, but if you have got any, feel free to ask me and I'll do my best to explain it in the comments, because I feel like that was a really bad way of explaining it. I did my best either way, but apart from that, as well as the archway above it, you can see that I placed down my favourite window in the game, which I feel like I haven't used in a while, and so I felt like it was about time that I used it. It's the window that we got from the industrial loft kit. I went for a phase, which in all fairness lasted I think like a handful of months, but I went for a phase in the game where whenever I did a build, I would just try and place that window down somewhere in it because I love it so much. I feel like you can work with it in so many different types of builds. I've used it in literal industrial penthouses. I've used it in Mediterranean builds. I've used it in like suburban family homes. But when we first got this initial window, I was so excited because we didn't really have anything like it in the game. And so I went for a phase where I consistently used it. But I feel like it's been a while since I've actually used it. And so I thought, you know what? I feel like I can use it now because I haven't used it in my last handful of uploads. But I placed that above the little archway area. I was debating using the window that I was talking about from my wedding stories, like the one with the shutters, the long version of that. But when I was placing it down, I thought that the industrial loft kit one looked better because where the archway itself below it, it's kind of got like a bit of a curve. The curve in the window kind of like then went along with it. I don't know, it just felt nicer to look at. But anyway, getting back to actually talking about what I'm doing right now. So as you can see, I'm pretty much just finishing up the initial driveway into the house. Now this is something that was kind of inspired by the original reference picture because it kind of had a bit of a, I don't want to say a grand entrance into the house in the picture that I was looking at, but it kind of had a bit of a fancier entrance than just like a bit of a pathway from the street. I'll re-pop it up on the screen so you can kind of refer back to what I'm talking about. I know I've already shown you it, but I mean, I probably would have already forgotten what it looks like if I was you watching this video, but I'll re-pop it up on the screen. And if you actually look at it, it looks like it's got these kind of like fences of bushes at the front, and it seems to have these pieces of columns to kind of like end it, and then there ends up being like some tall trees and kind of like other landscaped areas that seem to be landscaped with tiny little bushes. And I pretty much tried to do my take on it in the front garden landscaping. So one thing you might have noticed, I actually used this like bush and I sized it down as small as what it could go, and then I merged them all in together to try and make it look like the bush itself was just like a bit of a fence. I mean, it worked. I like the way it looked, and I don't think I've done this that many times in previous builds, and so maybe this will be something that I might do in future builds because, I mean, you can see it as I'm kind of like spinning the camera around as I'm doing the back garden landscape, and I'm trying to pull the same plants that I use in the front garden to use in the back garden, so kind of like it's a bit symmetrical in the landscaping. But you might have noticed it at the front garden. If not, I will actually come back to the front garden at the end of the video because I actually end up adding some ivy around the house. But another thing that I use in terms of landscaping are these massive planters, which I've realised, I've clocked onto the fact of, I only really ever seem to use these planters whenever I build in Oasis Springs. They are from the base game and they're from the live edit menu. You can just find them in and around the world, and I find them so fun to use when it comes around to landscaping area and you want it to be a little bit more like fancier, because it's lovely sometimes when you place down plants and landscaping and you have a little bit of dirt underneath it, but then if you want something to feel a little bit more fancier, a little bit more not even like this is going to be a fancy house, but a little bit more well put together, a little bit more manicured, these little planters perfect because then you can actually put plants into them and they just look a little bit more well put together. I don't know, I did actually really struggle with the landscaping in this build. You might notice I'm kind of like playing around with so many different things in the landscaping because I was really struggling on how to actually landscape it. Well, I mean, I say that I pretty much just struggled on this little area over here. You see where I placed down that rock? I was having such a mess. I ended up having to cut out some footage because I was having such a mess of how I wanted that to look, because I wanted it to look natural. And I don't know if you would have realised, at one point I tried to merge in a cactus into the actual rock. How is that realistic whatsoever? I don't know what I was thinking. I was just trying to make it look like it was a bit overgrown. It was an actual rock within the world of Oasis Springs, because Oasis Springs itself as a world is quite rocky. There's loads of different rocks and like mountains and cliffs. And so I was trying to make it like blend in with the surrounding area. And at one point I debated putting a cactus coming out of the rock, but it didn't even look, I don't actually know what I was thinking, but I was struggling a little bit when it came around to landscaping this house, but I feel like it came together in the end. It just took its time coming together, but you can see that I'm just doing this little kind of like alleyway area going into the back garden. Now the back garden itself, it does end up being quite small, but it ends up being a hot tub, which, to be honest, one of the only reasons why I put a hot tub in the garden is because where we're building in Oasis Springs, it is one of the hottest worlds that we've got in the game. I like there to be a swimming pool normally in my Oasis Spring back gardens because I want your Sims to be able to like go and cool off, but where there was such little space, I probably could have fitted a swimming pool, but it would have been so small, it would have looked so ridiculous. And so I thought, let's just place down a hot tub because then your Sims can still go in and cool off. But then I placed down the pergola as well above it. I just sized it down and then just popped it over it. The pergola itself is from the Sims 4 base game. We actually got it in an update a few years back. And then in a minute, Right, you're going to question me, and again, it was one of my questionable things I did when I was doing the exterior of this build. I basically end up adding like a bit of a chandelier onto the pergola. I was trying to basically make it so of a night time when your Sims are maybe chilling out in the hot tub, there is some like nice outdoor lighting. I tried to add in this ceiling light, but then I tried to make it look like it was coming from the pergola itself. It wasn't until I stepped back and I looked at it and I was thinking, that is quite literally fabric on the top of it. You got to be a really good electrician to be able to have wires coming through that fabric into the lights. And so if you're looking at that and thinking that is a bit ridiculous, I ended up deleting it. I wanted there to be something to make it like nicely well lit, but then I ended up adding these tiny little lights that we got from the Desert Lux kit anyway in the back garden. So I do end up replacing that kind of like chandelier light thing. I don't know what I was thinking. I just wanted there to be a nice little bit of ambience of an evening when your Sims are maybe chilling out in the hot tub or something. But anyway, as you can see, I'm just finishing up the little back garden area over here. Now, as well as the hot tub and the pergola, there ends up being a few planters, a couple of summer lounges, and that is honestly pretty much it. There's a few different fountains, which, I mean, they've got no gameplay, but they look pretty. There's one in the alleyway and there's also one in the back garden, kind of like facing the sun lounges. But there is a little bit of a method to my madness, because even though it's a fairly big family home, there only ends up being enough stuff to accommodate for like 2 Sims in the garden. But I have my reasonings, and it's because I am building this for my save file, which I don't think I've mentioned yet, but this house will be my save. And when I was building this, I was thinking of the storyline for the Sims that could be living here, and I will speak more about the storyline when I actually move on into the initial bedrooms. But basically, to kind of like tell you the reason why there's only 2 sun lounges, pretty much the idea that I had, the kind of like scenario that I had in my head, was originally only 2 Sims lived in this house, and it was going to be a couple of grandparents, but then because of some circumstances, their grandchildren had to come and move in, but then they still haven't like extended the garden, or they haven't replaced their garden furniture, and so it's still only got the 2 sun lounges. But I'll speak more about the storyline when I actually move on and I start doing their bedrooms and stuff. But as you can see, I've now actually moved on into the house itself, and I started off by doing the little tiny entrance hallway, but now I've moved over into the kitchen. Now, something that you might notice on the downstairs portion more so than the upstairs portion of this house is some of the rooms are a bit oddly shaped, more so the kitchen and then also the lounge room. The lounge room is a very weird layout, and I feel like in terms of like the kitchen itself, the actual shape of the room isn't that weird. It's just the way that I put the kitchen counters is in kind of like a formation that I don't normally tend to do. I never really have them corner pieces, but for the floor plan, I just felt like this was the easiest way to have the kitchen counters laid out in terms of when you're in gameplay, because I always try and have the kitchen counters, so you know when you go into like half wall up, half wall down mode, I always like to have it so like the fridge and the kitchen counters and the oven are kind of on them walls that you will consistently see in gameplay, just because from playing the game myself for so long, I know what I prefer, and I always prefer that. And so whenever I do floor plans for kitchens, whenever I do like counter floor plans for kitchens, I always try and make it so they're kind of like on the back wall. And so when it came around to doing this kitchen, I could have either had the kitchen layout that I end up going for, or I could have had a really big kitchen. And the reason why it would have been really big is, see where the plant is over in this corner, I could have basically placed down like the counter pieces here and then go into like the left hand side of the screen and going down that wall. But then it would have ended up being absolutely massive, and it would have been a bit, as I just felt like it would have been a bit unnecessary. And so I decided to do this layout for the kitchen. I don't know why I'm telling you about the counter placement. I never normally do, but that's because I normally just do a very similar placement. Like I said, I like to build my houses as easy as I can for gameplay. It's not just kitchen counters that I do like particular things with. I do things with like, say for instance, you know, whenever I do a bathroom, I think I have mentioned this before, but it was a very long time ago, I think. Whenever I do a bathroom, I don't know if you're going to notice this now, I'm going to say it. I always try, sometimes it's not the case, but I 9 times out of 10 will always try to have the toilet closer to the door than what the sink is, because you know sometimes when you have a really big sink and it's kind of like blocking the toilet, I try and always place the toilet closer to the door, or like close to the view that you'd be viewing in half wall up, half wall down mode, because to me that's easier in gameplay. Because sometimes if you have a bit of a big sink and then you need to get your sim to click on the toilet, or you click on the toilet, it can just be a bit of a, it's not even that much of a hassle. Maybe I'm just a bit lazy, but I like the toilet to be closest to the door so you don't have to like turn the camera more if you don't need to, if that makes any sense. I have like weird things like that I do when it comes around to building, but it's only because when it comes around to playing the game myself, I've just found some things that I find annoying, and so whenever I do my builds, I always try and implement the things that I find annoying not into them, but try and avoid them, if that makes any sense. But either way, getting back to the build, as you can see, I've now moved over into this little dining room. Now in here ends up being a short little sweet room that ends up being these chairs which are from Cats and Dogs, and then I matched them with this table which is from the Sims 4 base game. And then over here I wanted there to be kind of like a little side table, and something that I did is I wanted there to be a bit of a leaning mirror, but we don't really have anything like that in the game. And so using the tool mod again, I basically put the mirror on the wall and then I moved it down, and then I basically used the gravity pull feature to pull it out from the wall, and then again using the tool mod I then rotated it so it now looks like a tiny little mirror has just been placed onto the little side table. We don't really have anything like that in the game. I feel like recently we have started getting some more smaller mirrors. I know that we got one from, it was either Discover University or the Pastel Pop Kit, or we might have got one from both, but it's kind of like a tiny little mirror that, you know, oftentimes if you do your makeup you've got them little mirrors that you can kind of like place down into your desk or something. We've been getting some of them recently, but we don't have any like little tiny mirrors that you can just place down onto the side, and so I basically just tried to create my own. Like I said, I used the method of pretty much just rotating and elevating with the tool mod. Now I've said this so many times at this point, but I still get questions consistently about the tool mod and how you download it, and if you need it, if you want to download my builds. If you're downloading this build, you don't then need to go and download anything else. It was just purely the tool mod is something that I use to like rotate objects, to size up objects, to like just move objects about here and there, but it's not required. So say if you're someone that's playing on console and you want to download this build off the gallery, you still can. It's going to look the exact same. The archway at the front, you know how I sized it up and then I moved it into the floor, that will still transfer over to the gallery. That little mirror on the side table, again, same scenario, it will still transfer over to the gallery. The tool mod is such an amazing mod. I don't even know how they managed to do it. The fact of you can literally do all these things and just transform all these different objects in the game, but then when you actually put it onto the gallery, it's still not classed as CC, so it's absolutely amazing. It's brilliant. If you play it on PC and you still haven't downloaded the tool mod or the Better Build Buy mod, honestly, please do it. First of all, if you haven't downloaded the Better Build Buy mod and you're looking for more things to decorate your Sims houses with, honestly, download it, go for the debug menu, you are going to have the absolute time of your life. Like, it is my favourite thing to do whenever we get a new pack, whether it be an expansion pack, a game pack, a stuff, whatever we get in. I love going through the live edit menu and the debug menu, because sometimes there is better stuff in there than the actual paid DLC stuff that actually comes within the Better Build Buy for that pack, if that makes any sense. But yeah, you don't need the tool mod to download this build. It's just purely something that I use as kind of like a tool to help me build better and kind of like help me get all these bits and pieces in like a better formation, a better shape. But it is no way required if you want to download this build off a gallery. I just thought I'd mention that because I still get questions about it every so often. But anyway, moving on, as you can see, I just finished up that little hallway area and now I've moved on into the lounge space. So in here, to be completely transparent with you, this room, I'm not joking, probably took me about 5, maybe even 6 attempts. Obviously I cut it all out. This is the final and last attempt. This is the attempts that I end up going for. But I tried so many different layouts of this room because it is such a strange shape. There is so many different things that made this room really difficult to make it so the house kind of like seemed to flow with the room. And I always like the method of whenever you're placing down furniture, try and picture where your Sims are moving. So if they need to get out the back door, okay, there can't be really anything in the middle of it because I don't want your Sims to be blocked by it. And I was just trying to think about the layout of the room, but then also making it so it makes sense. But then there was other things in the room that were just making it really difficult for me, which, I mean, I did it to myself. This was very much self-inflicted, but pretty much you'll notice that this room is a little bit lower down than the rest of the house. Now, the reason for that is being on the exterior in the back garden, there ends up being 3 different platforms all kind of like merged in together, but they're all at different heights. I wanted your Sims to be able to go down these platforms, and instead of placing down stairs, the platforms act like stairs, but in doing that I needed them to be different heights to one another. But then the actual platform for this room on the exterior ends up being a little bit lower down than the rest of the house, and so the room itself needed to be a little bit lower down, only by like 1 platform click, but it still needs to be lower than the rest of the house. But then you can see over here there ends up being a door which ends up going into like the main bedroom of the house. I didn't want that door to be floating, so then I had to have a bit of a platform area so your Sims then could, you know, walk into the actual door. But then it was an absolute meh, to be honest with you. I managed to make it work in the end, but to be completely transparent with you, it took me forever. I actually had to take 5 minutes and come back to the build, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, and sometimes you just have to do that when it comes around to furnishing the insides. If you really can't make it work your first time round, sometimes just taking 5 minutes away from it. I mean, I say 5 minutes, I think I ended up taking around about an hour or something, but I ended up coming back to it, and then when I came back to it, for the last and final time, it then seemed to come together quite naturally. And I know you're probably looking at this and thinking it doesn't seem that difficult, but the back of the back of the room was really throwing me off, because behind the 3-seater sofa there's this quite large bump out, and I wanted your Sims to be able to get to it. And going back to, I wanted my Sims and your Sims to be able to walk through this house freely and there's nothing kind of be blocking their way. The fact that there was a 3-seater sofa kind of like in front of this bookcase was just, it was throwing me off. But in the end, I managed to make it work. In that room, I ended up using the sofas and the armchairs that we got from the Courtyard Oasis Kit. Often don't use them, don't really get that much use in my builds, but it kind of matched with this Mediterranean house, and so I decided to use them in this kind of like grey swatch, which I think when I've used these sofas before in the past, I've only ever used them in the default swatch, which is very similar to the swatch that I ended up using, but the only difference is the default swatch is kind of like a cream cushion, like the base of the actual sofa itself is like a cream cushion. It's got these really beautiful red pattern cushions and some like small little cream cushions, and it's a very beautiful swatch, the default swatch. But I thought I'd switch it up and actually change the swatch to be this kind of like grey swatch. That way it kind of matched the wallpaper in that room as well. But then also in that room there ended up being like a little computer desk area, a bookcase like I just mentioned, and then there is also the big bifolding doors that we got from the Desert Luxe Kit. I was about to say the modern Desert Luxe Kit. It is quite a modern pack, but that unfortunately is not the name. But from the Desert Luxe Kit, the bifolding doors end up being in that room as well. But anyway, moving on, as you can see, I've now moved on into the first bedroom of this house, which is the master bedroom. Now, there ends up being a utility room in this house as well, or like a second bathroom, but I decided to cut it out just because, again, with the lounge space and the kitchen space, it was a bit of a strange room, and I had a bit of a difficulty with that one. And where it's quite similar to the bathroom itself, I just decided to cut it out. The only difference being in the utility room, there ends up being a washing machine and a tumble dryer, and then it's pretty much the exact same as the other bathroom which you end up seeing. But this is the bathroom which I imagine that 2 grandparents would live in. Now, like I said, I am building this for my save file, so I have got a little bit of a storyline that I was running off when I was building this house. And basically the idea that I had for this family is originally 2 grandparents lived here, and then because of some circumstances their grandchildren had to come and move in with them. Now, I was trying to think for so many different reasonings and so many different ideas of to why the grandchildren in this house happen to be living with their grandparents and why they don't live with their parents anymore. I was thinking of so many different storyline ideas. I was thinking of 2 main ideas, and then I ended up combining them. So basically the first idea that I had was maybe the parents of the kids in this household, someone was trying to make a mac and cheese or a grilled cheese and they didn't have a high cooking skill, and then they basically just end up burning the house down, and then the parents passed away. I was thinking that idea, but then I was thinking back to it for my save file for this particular area that I'm building in Oasis Springs, which, if you're not familiar of this area, the Caliente family. This is where they originally live, if you know where they live. Well, I was thinking for my save file, I more like famous Sims or semi-famous Sims living here in my save, just because it's quite a nice, a bit of a fancy area. I feel like if you've got a bit of money, or if you've got a bit of presence either from film and TV, or if you're a bit of a musician or something, I feel like you're more so going to live here if you're retired, or even if you're not retired and you're still very active in your career. I feel like this is a good place to get them kind of Sims to live. And I was thinking back to the house that I built neighbouring to this lot. So the house, you might have noticed it when I was building the exterior structure, it's on the left hand side of this house, but I built it for my save file already, and the storyline that I had for the Sims that are going to be living in that house is a retired actress, and she's got this whole massive long storyline which I'm not going to go too far into depth with because I spoke quite in depth about their storyline in that video. But she basically lives in the house next door with her teenage daughter. She's a bit of a retired actress now turned businesswoman, and so I wanted something that was a little bit not similar to that, but I wanted something on the same kind of idea, that maybe you have some kind of connection to fame. You might not be directly famous, but you have got some kind of connections to the fame world and that kind of lifestyle. And so the idea that I came up with is merging my first initial idea of maybe the parents passed away in a house fire. I was thinking that maybe one of the parents passed away in a house fire, but then the other parent just happens to be a very successful musician and basically has taken so much time up of their life consumed by their career that they basically just go on tour consistently and leaving their kids at home wasn't really something that they could do anymore because their partner passed away, and so the kids basically had to come and move in with the grandparents. Now, I really like this idea. I still need to develop what the grandparents would have done before they retire, because I imagine both the grandparents, before their grandchildren would have moved in, they would have just been, you know, retired from a certain career that they might have had their whole entire life, or they might have been maybe Sims that hop career to career or something. But in terms of like the grandparents' core storyline, I haven't really got too much in depth for them, but I just like the main bulk of the idea of, you know, their grandchildren have got to come and move in because maybe previously, before one of the parents passed away, maybe they were a bit of a homemaker, you know, they love spending time with their kids, and then they passed away and then their kids were a little bit lost. But then maybe it was at the time where the other parent, their career is kind of like skyrocketing, it's taken off, they need to have this time to go on tour and stuff. And I like the idea, and you'll notice when I move on into the teenager's bedroom, because I've now actually moved on into furnishing some of the other rooms, but in the teenager's bedroom I was more so thinking they're not happy with this idea, you know, that one of their parents has passed away and they've only been left with one parent, and then this parent's just kind of like hit the road and is now touring all these different stadiums, doing all these different venue gigs and stuff. And so I was thinking that the teenager in this household is really annoyed. And so when you come around to doing their bedroom, you'll notice on the floor I placed down loads of different like letters and mail and just like packages. I was thinking that maybe even though the parent is on tour, they're still thinking about their kid and they still want to have like a nice relationship with their kids, but they just want to maybe put their career a little bit first for them. Maybe with the other parents passing, it really just, it set them off, and going out and doing all these different stadium tours and something is something that maybe gets their mind off it. Maybe, I don't know, I just thought of that right now, but maybe that's one of the reasons why they haven't settled down and just kind of taken to family home life. Maybe that's the reason. I just really like the idea. But yeah, when I move on into the teenager's bedroom, you'll notice by like the mirror and in like corners of the room, I try to place down letters that it looks like the parent has written to maybe the teenager to talk to them and maybe like have a little bit of a communication thing with them. And I imagine that the teenager is so not happy about the situation, and so there's all these unopened packages and parcels and just letters and stuff in the corner of their room. That was kind of like the main bulk of the storyline. I still haven't really got that much in depth in terms of all the different individual Sims themselves. Like, I don't know what kind of Sim the kids are going to be, because the way that I've decorated the rooms, I was more so thinking we've got the grandparents' room downstairs and then we've got the teenagers' room, which I've now moved on to, but then the two previous rooms that you would have seen me just do were kind of like kids' rooms. I haven't got really much of a personality idea for the kids. I just imagine the teenagers to be quite independent because they've had quite a lot of things kind of like thrown their way so early on in life. But yeah, that was just kind of like a little bit of the storyline that I've got for the Sims that are going to be living in this house. Like I said, in terms of like the grandparents themselves, I don't really know what they previously did before they retired. I just imagine them to be retired and they go to like bingo and they go to like bowling and stuff like that. I imagine them to be quite stereotypical grandparents. And one thing I wanted to point out actually with this house, I wanted it to be a grandparent's house, but I didn't want it to be decorated with like floral curtains or things like that, because I feel like whenever I do grandparents' houses, I more so go to the stereotypical kind of like grandparents style, and I didn't want that to be the case for this house. And so you'll notice there's not really too much of that in terms of the furniture pieces that I've used. In like some of the bedrooms, I did try to use more older fashioned like lampshades and stuff. You know, in the two kids' rooms that I've already done, on their bedroom tables, I basically placed down these quite old-fashioned and base game lights. I was thinking that originally the bedroom was decorated to be for the kids, but then over time, over the course of the past, I don't know, a few years or however long they've been staying with their grandparents, they've kind of adapted their room, they've added posters to the walls, but the initial actual furniture pieces, or more so their grandparents' furniture, but then the other bits and bobs are just kind of like their own stuff, if you get what I mean. But you can see that I'm just going around now and just finishing up the teenager's bedroom. You would have just seen in the corner underneath the mirror, that's where I added some of them packages and some of the like letters that I imagined that one of the parents wrote to them. I did debate for a second adding in a TV into their room, kind of like across their bed. I actually did it in my video which I posted last week when I built kind of like a realistic family home. I built a teenager's bedroom and there was a double bed and it had a TV opposite. I was going to do the same thing in that room, but then I was thinking, well, if the grandparents just kind of like renovated their rooms that they had in their house, realistically Are they going to put a TV in for the teenager? I didn't think so. And so I just ended up placing down like a bunch of different like wall decorations and posters and just little knickknacks basically into that room. But now, as you can see, I've now moved on into the last room in the house, which is the garage. Now, similar to the lounge space, when it came around to doing this room, originally I really did not know what I wanted this room to be and how I wanted it to be laid out in terms of all the different things that your Sims can actually do within this room. And so I thought, you know what, instead of just trying to figure it out now, I'm going to do the rest of the build, get a bit of a better understanding of the Sims that are going to be living here, and then I'll come back at the end of the video and then I'll do the little garage space. And that is pretty much exactly what I did. So in here ends up being a bit of an activity room. There is a woodworking table. There is also a little card table in the corner. I was thinking that maybe the grandparents host like card game night every like Thursday or Friday night or something, and all their mates come round. Also ended up adding a little decoration box that we got from Seasons. Also a heater as well next up, which now looking back on probably is not needed in the world of Oasis Springs, but I thought I'd add one in there anyway in case maybe it's really chilly one particular day. And then I also add like a little beverage fridge in the corner for certain types of beverages, if you get what I mean. But then apart from that, I'm going to go around the exterior, finish it off by adding in some final pieces, some ivy and stuff, and that is pretty much it. So anyway guys, I'm going to end this voiceover right here. As always, you can download this build via the gallery. My gallery ID is JessicapieYT, or you can search for the hashtag JessicapieYT or just the hashtag Jessicapie. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, if you do like my content then please do subscribe, and hopefully I will see you in my next Sims 4 speedbuilding video. Bye guys!